Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing a video all about popular series that I have DNF'd and will not be completing, and one honorable mention. These are very popular books that have a lot of fans, they're just not for me. So here we go. The first one is a little bit interesting because I'm going with the DC Icons series that has been published by Random House. I loved all three books that I read in it. I read Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo, I read Batman by Marie Lu, and I read Catwoman by Sarah J. Maas. I loved all three of them, but the fourth and final book in the series is Superman by Matthew de la Pena, and I don't care for Superman, so I'm not gonna read an entire novel about Superman. I just can't see myself getting through that. Hence the DNF of this series, which kind of pains me. I wish it would have been a book about like Batgirl or Nightwing or so many other characters within the DC universe, although I know that, or even Supergirl. I would love a Supergirl novel too, just not Superman. Pass. Number 2 on my list is The Illuminae Files by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I read the first book in The Illuminae Files and I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And I heard that it is a companion series, so the next book follows a different set of characters that a lot of people tended not to like as much. I have realized that I very much prefer watching sci-fi to reading sci-fi, with the exception of like Star Wars books pretty much. So I don't know if that's why, but I just can't see myself finishing the series when I wasn't super in love with the first one. So I've decided to move on, to give these up. Series number 3 is where we're going to start offending some people probably. I have made the decision to not finish the 5th and final book in the Percy Jackson series. I missed the boat on Percy Jackson. I think I'm just too old at this point to care about it and love it the way that other people loved it who grew up with it. I feel like Harry Potter was my middle grade series, and I think a lot of other people that are younger than me had Percy for them when they were younger, and I just don't relate to him now. I do think that the books have gotten progressively better with each one. I read books 1 through 4 and I enjoyed each one a little bit more, but I'm doing this new thing where I'm not reading books just to have read books. I'm reading books that I'm really interested in reading. So I've decided to give up on the series, and I actually gave all of my copies to Alexa from Alexa Loves Books. Number 4 is one that I've talked about before, but it is the Shatter Me series by Tahereh Mafi. I read the first book in the series, Shatter Me, and didn't care for it at all. I didn't really like the writing style. I didn't really like the main character. I didn't get everyone's fascination with Warner. The only part of the book that semi-interested me was the ending of the book, because it seemed like a turning point when things would kind of be changing, but it was not enough to make me want to pick up the next book. So I have unhauled those in the past, and that's a series that I'm for sure not finishing. Next is a newer series, and that is the Something Dark and Holy series by Emily A. Duncan. I read the first book, Wicked Saints, the month before it was released, and I really didn't enjoy it. I really wanted to love it, but it just didn't work for me. I think that a lot of the book had so much to do with war. I have to like really care about characters before I care about whatever war is happening. Things would like go on and they'd be talking about, you know, what happened between these two places and why they're fighting, and I would be like, but why do I care? And the thing was that I didn't. I really didn't enjoy that one very much, which is controversial. A lot of other people seem to love it, and it was like one of their favorite books. It just didn't work for me. I was pretty bored while I was reading it, and I wanted to finish it so that I could give it a full chance, but I also like really wanted to DNF it while I was reading it, but I pushed through, so I will not be reading more of them. Number 6 is also a newer series, and that is the Legacy of Orisha series by Tomi Adeyemi. I thought that the concept for this novel was really interesting, and while I did enjoy reading it, the insta-love in it just like really bothered me and seemed so unnecessary, and I think I would have enjoyed it more if that wasn't an aspect in it. And then Tomi Adeyemi had that whole thing with Nora Roberts, which kind of like turned me off from her. Like, she apologized, but it was kind of a non-apology. I just can't see myself picking up the next one. Number 7 that I'm not planning on finishing is the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. I enjoyed the first book when I read it, and I did think that it was cool how it had the dual timelines, like, so we got to see a little bit of what was going on during the 1940s when the murder took place, and then what was going on in the present day while this girl is like looking into the case and trying to come up with new details that people in the past didn't see. And I enjoyed it while reading it. I honestly don't remember a ton from it, which is proof that it hasn't really like stuck with me. So I never felt the drive to pick up the second novel. I never like bought a copy or anything, and I just don't see myself picking it up in the future. Next is the Renegades series by Marissa Meyer. I read the first book in the series, which is Renegades, and it was about superheroes, which I thought was cool, but I thought that it was very predictable. I was just kind of waiting for the end to happen, and when it did, I was like, well, yeah, I saw that coming. And it was supposed to be a duology, so I was like, all right, I'll read the next book now that this element has been thrown into here. And then it was announced that it was being turned into a trilogy, and I was like, what? The first book is over 500 pages. I think the second book is over 500 pages, and now there's going to be a third book that's also in the 500 page area, and I was just like, I probably would have read the second one if that would have been the ending, but I didn't enjoy it enough to commit to another 1,000 pages of these characters. Number 9 is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. I read this first book back way in the beginning of when I started my YouTube channel, and I thought the vintage photography in it was really cool, but the story just didn't grip me. And I think there's like 4 books now, and there might be another one coming out. Like, a series just keeps on going. I'm just not interested in reading it. Next is the Imperium series by Claire Legrand. I read Furyborn last year, and there were 2 different perspectives. There's a Sun Queen and a Blood Queen, but you don't know which one is going to be which, although I did feel like that was kind of obvious. There was only one perspective that I really cared about, but even so, I never felt like, oh my gosh, I want to read this book. I was always like, oh yeah, this is what I'm in the middle of. I guess I'll read it now. It just was kind of boring to me. I found it disappointing because I thought that it was a really great idea, and it had been so hyped, but it just was so boring to me. And I ended up having to take a break for a little while because it was like a holiday or something. I think I read it around Thanksgiving last year, and I had been halfway into the book, and then when I went to pick it back up, I was like, I feel like I don't remember anything that happened in the first 250 pages, which is a really bad sign. It obviously came back to me as soon as I started reading. I understand why my brain was not focused on this. Number 11 on my list is the 3 Dark Crowns series by Kendara Blake. This is kind of like the same situation as the Renegades series. I read the first book, 3 Dark Crowns. I did think that it was kind of boring. I really enjoyed the ending yet again. So this one I felt like had a really strong beginning. I was very into the poisoners and everything, and then I thought it had a super strong ending, but the middle of the book really just like dragged on a lot, and it was supposed to be a duology, so I was like, sure, I'll read the second book and that's fine. But now again, it has turned into a series that is like 4 books, and I'm just not gonna invest my time in something that I was not really enjoying. And it pains me because her other series, her Anna Dressed in Blood series, I love that duology so much. So I really thought I was gonna love 3 Dark Crowns, but I'm really excited to see whatever it is that Kendara Blake will write next. Next is one that I talked about way back in the day, again, on my YouTube channel, and that is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Outlander is actually the first book in my entire life that I ever DNF'd. I never DNF'd a book before that. I tried so hard to push myself through this book. I read 560 pages of it, so I was pretty close to the end, but I just couldn't go any further. I had issues with the relationship. It was kind of abusive, and I wasn't prepared for that because people are so like obsessed with that relationship going into it, and I don't know, it just bothered me. Like, I just couldn't get past it, and there are some really awful people in there, which I totally get is realistic because there are really bad people in the world, but it just wasn't holding my interest. I guess if I had liked the characters more, maybe I would have continued on or been able to like push through those scenes that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't. Next is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This is is such a weird series to me, honestly, because I feel like people talk about it as if it's one of the most popular YA fantasy series, but I don't actually know anyone who's really liked it. I read the first book and I thought that the pacing was really good, but I didn't really like the story. It was just too derivative of like the Hunger Games and the Selection series for me. I thought it was just pulling from a lot of other series, which people are bound to have similar ideas because so much has been done at this point. As soon as I finished that book, I was like, yeah, I'm not reading any more of these. And the same is true for so many of my friends who have read it. I'm so interested as to like why it's always pushed as this like huge series, and yet I don't know a single person that likes it. Number 14 is the A Discovery of Witches trilogy by Deborah Harkness. I read the first book and I really enjoyed it. It took me a little while to get into it, but once I kind of got into the groove, I ended up really loving it and loving the characters and loving just the whole story. I thought it was awesome. Sorry, it's actually called the All Souls trilogy. So I tried to pick up the second book, which is Shadow of Night, and the male, like love interest, Matthew, I could not stand him. He was being such a jerk in that book. I think I read like 100 pages and I was like, I just can't deal with him. Like he's really turning me off from wanting to read any more of this. So I ended up DNFing it and I'm not gonna be finishing that series, but I am interested in watching the television show. Next is the Darkest Minds trilogy by Alexandra Bracken, or now I guess it's a quartet because she had that other book come out that's in it. It took me like a month to read the first book in the series, The Darkest Minds, which is so unusual for me because I usually read a book like every couple of days, but I just couldn't get into it. I just kept like only reading a very little bit of it every single day. I think that if I had read this when I was like in high school or like shortly thereafter, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. There are very few dystopian novels that I really enjoy at this point in life. I would say the standout of like new series is the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. That's a dystopian that I am so here for. It's so good. But yeah, I just couldn't get on board with The Darkest Minds. And then I thought what I saw of the movie was awful. Number 16 is one that breaks my heart, and it is the Sookie Stackhouse series by Charlene Harris. I really love this series. I read books 1 through 12, I want to say, and there are 13 books, or I read books 1 to 11 and there are 12 books. I can't remember off the top of my head. The reason that I will not read this final book is because I was spoiled on who Sookie ends up with out of all of like the love interests in all of the books, and I hate it. And I refuse to accept it as canon, and that is not the ending that I have for her in my head. So I'm just not ever reading that because I don't want that to be true. Number 17 is the Divergent series by Veronica Roth. This is obviously an older one too, but I read the first book in the series, Divergent. I read it in one flight from New York to San Diego when I went to Comic-Con like years ago, and I loved it. I thought it was really great, but then I found out about how it ended and I decided that I didn't want to put myself through that, and also at this point it's just not something that I would read anyway. Number 18 is the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. I read the first 4 or 5 books in the series, and honestly I could read these books. I could probably read 2 or 3 of them a day if I was just reading them and doing nothing else. They're not good. Like, I like the show, which is also arguably like not great, and I totally get that. It's fun, mindless entertainment as a television series, but when it comes to reading, I just can't read the rest of them. I just can't do it. Next is another one that I feel like is gonna be a little controversial, and that is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So the 5th season, it took me, I like vividly remember it wasn't until page like 191 that I got really invested in the story. It took me quite a while to get there. I thought that it was very clever and I liked the idea of it, but I just didn't like it enough to keep going. I didn't feel like it was for me, and I didn't love second person perspective. That is really tough. I decided not to read the rest of those. And then number 20, which is my honorable mention, is an honorable mention solely because I am finishing this trilogy, but it is begrudgingly, and that is the Modern Fairy Tale series by Holly Black. So it's me and some of my booktube friends here, Alexa from Alexa Loves Books, Jane from It's Jane Lindsay, and Mel from Mel to the Any, are hosting Fairy-a-thon. So we've been reading one Holly Black book a month leading up to the release of The Queen of Nothing. We're reading everything that's set within the world of the Folk of the Air series, and Modern Fairy Tales is the first series to kick that off, but I have not liked either book so far. Like, after reading Tithe, I never would have read Valiant. The only reason that I did is because of this readathon, and after reading Valiant, I have zero desire to read Ironside, quite honestly, but I'm going to do it just because we're doing it for our readathon and I want to know what I need to know for the Folk of the Air. So putting myself through it. Thankfully, they're short books. If they were longer, I probably would have been like, sorry guys, I can't. So that's why it's an honorable mention. Those are some of the popular series that I have decided not to continue with. There are definitely other series that I've also DNF'd, but these are the ones that most people know about or talk about, so I just wanted to share them. Let me know if you have any similar or conflicting thoughts from me, but please be respectful about it, and I will see you guys soon in a new video. Bye!